What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. My guest, the one and only Mike Wahle. Once again, it is Friday. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Wahle68. Mike, one of these days, maybe we're going to talk about a victory, but this week is not that week. How have you been, and what's new in your world?
I've been great, Andy. Thanks for having me on, as always. I would say that not only is this week not a victory Friday, I think we're 5-point underdogs going into the game at Lambeau here versus Mike McCarthy and the crew. So this is a great season. This is actually a really fun season for anybody who's been on other teams. Because I went from the Packers to the Panthers, and we immediately went to the NFC Championship. But then quarterback gets hurt. A couple of things happen. Vinny Testaverde, David Carr. Oh my goodness, I could tell you David Carr stories. He's like best Xbox player, worst prepared quarterback in the history of like the Carolina Panthers football program. And then we went to see, and then I went to I was in Seattle, and I think that year, that was my last year. I went on IR. All 5 offensive linemen went on IR. One of our running backs went on IR, and Matt Hasselbeck is literally being held together by duct tape and like in cloth and string. And Mike Holmgren walks through the locker room like we're all sitting. It's like week 10. We've lost a ton of games, and we're literally, and imagine this. There's 7 tables right in the training room. It's Sean Locklear, Rob Sims, Chris Spencer, myself, Walt Jones, right? And then Matt's on the end one. And Mike walks by each one and just gives us the look of just absolute disappointment. Everybody, Green Bay knows what Mike Holmgren's disappointment look looks like. And then he just looks at Hasselbeck. He says, I can't directly quote him. He says something to the effect of, "You're the only reason I'm still doing this, man. I'm glad you're at least playing." And Matt's like ready to go like, "No, actually, you need to bring in the righty, man. I'm out of here. I'm dead right now."
That's unbelievable.
So welcome to Thunderdome, people. This is how it is for everybody else in the league.
It's been one of those seasons, and it's just like, if anything can break bad, the Minnesota Vikings are on the top, basically top of the NFC North by a ton. Only lost 1 game so far. And then you've got Justin Fields in Chicago all of a sudden playing good ball. Like, just everything, just going chef kiss amazing for the Packers so far. Not maybe amazing's a little bit aggressive, but he's taking a step in the direction at least. So just everything. Yeah, exactly. So just everything going the way against the Packers right now. But let's talk about Packers Lions first before we get into a couple of the other things. We talked aggressively last week about how terrible this Lions secondary is and how Green Bay should have an opportunity to take advantage of that. To be fair, they took advantage of it somewhat between the 20s. And once they got in the red zone, kind of crapped the bed and let things get away a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I don't think you could have convinced either of us that the Packers would put up only 9 points of offense against that Lions team. In your opinion, what happened and why was Green Bay not able to get better point production against that defense?
The most important part about being an athlete, every athlete figures this out at a different time, but the most important thing, the most value you have to a team is your ability to win your 1v1 matchup. We could talk about all the schemes and all Matt LaFleur's genius, Sean McVay offensive coaching plans and all how we're going to attack it. If you can't win your 1v1 matchup, you are not valuable to the team. And we have guys that just don't win very often. And it really is that easy. The second play of the game, we're running wrong routes. We have guys that are getting pressed outside. I mean, we have plays that are being made by Aaron. For everybody who's complaining about Aaron Rodgers, if Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback in that game, it could be even worse with some of the throws he's required to make and some of the moves he's required to make, given how far we get pushed off and some of our routes, how far off we are the red line, how poorly we run sail routes and to cover 2-7s. So we have to do a better job at executing the plays that are called. We've talked about this for weeks, Andy. Like, is it reducing the playbook? Is it just expecting more? Is it more intense practices? What is the answer? I'm not sure because we're not in the building. But certainly when you watch this, it's a confluence of events. It's not just the route running, but it's certainly in large part, like Aaron's walking around out there or standing around going, he's almost like he's surprised when their guys are getting open. Like I believe there was a screenshot of Twitter going around where somebody's running the seam route, but it's actually 2 people running the seam route, going to run right into each other, and Aaron doesn't throw the ball.
Lazard and Tunyon, yep.
And that's like the explanation of like why Aaron's not playing well. And like obviously you have to think of a couple different things. You know, he's got coverages to read. He has a route progression he's supposed to go through. You know, is there people in his face? Is he seeing the rush for the first time? You know, certainly he needs to play better. I don't think that's on anybody's that's on everybody's wish list. But you know, there's a lot that goes into it, and when you don't trust that the routes are going to get run the right way, you don't trust the protection is going to be where it needs to be. Like you turn into a different quarterback.
And we've seen that, right? Like it is very clear he's not trusting what his receivers and tight ends are doing. He's not trusting his offensive line, and a lot of times, understandably so. And then you get into those situations where all of a sudden, on a random play, the offensive line is actually picking everything up. The receiver's actually getting open, and you can see there's times where he has the ability to pull the trigger, and it's just like he's just not trusting it because it hasn't happened with any regularity, and he can't trust that it's going to happen over and over, and that things haven't gone irrevocably wrong throughout the course of that play, because that's what's been happening more often than not. You brought up that second play of the game. I don't know how many times, and I've said this a couple of times this week, I don't know how many times I threw up my hands watching the all 22, just being like, what the hell is going on? Because the second play you're mentioning, it's a bootleg out to the right, and Sammy Watkins is running a play back to the left side of the field, either the worst design play in the history of the NFL, or more clearly, Sammy Watkins just not running the right play on the route. It's wide open space probably in the middle of the field too if he attacks that second layer.
Ran over the lion's tail, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And my guess, if I had to guess, first play of the game goes to Romeo, and he gets hurt. My guess is that second play, Romeo's supposed to be in that spot, probably practiced that play all week long. That's going to him. And then Sammy comes in, not practice that play all week. Not an excuse by any means, but my guess is that's probably not his route that they practiced all week, and it ends up being an absolute nightmare. But those are the things that have been happening to this Green Bay team over and over and over, and it's really, really hard to watch.
It certainly is, Andy. I think the one thing that you forget about is all these guys are pros. Not you, but I think that the fans forget it. And sometimes these players forget, like, hey, you're a professional and your responsibilities are like, you need to know everything on the playbook, on the play sheet. And what that means. And now there's two things that you can look at. One, if Romeo Doubs is the person supposed to be running that route, and you've tagged him as the person that's running that route, and so nobody else is allowed to run it, then you can't call it.
Right.
And that does happen. I can't imagine it happening with a bootleg play, but that does happen. But if that plays in the playbook and it's not tagged for a specific person, you need to know that route. There's no excuse, especially for what he is, a 7-8 year vet.
Yeah.
And you listen. We've seen this all across the offensive line with all the injuries that have happened there. You're starting to see that with you're going to see. I promise you're going to see it on the defensive line play this week with Gary being out. But this is the responsibility of professionals to learn how to do their job as best they can, regardless of the situation. If your number is called, you have to be able to stand up and make those kind of plays. And this is kind of for a lot of people, for people like me, like this is gut check time. And if I was in that locker room, you're not happy about your situation, but you're also excited because I love to see what people are made of, right? I love to see what my teammates are made of. I love to see what kind of competitors we have. That's easy for us to kind of sit out here and say, but I'll just tell you, factually, when you're in this situation, you really find out a lot about your teammates and about the kind of people they are and the competitors they are. And so there is like a silver lining in some of these situations, especially maybe not this year, but they can build on this and the rest of the year finish this well, and then build this for the next couple of years and build something special.
No, I guarantee Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst have a very close eye on who's responding well to the adversity. It hasn't been responded to well so far, but like you said, this is gut check time. This is a probably very unfun part of the job when you can't win football games and your injury list is about half of the football team right now. Rashawn Gary goes on IR. A lot of bad vibes to go around, and the players that are trying to respond to it and turn it around. Like I said, I'm sure Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst are keeping tabs of that as they try to probably remake this roster in probably a fairly significant way in 2023. You brought up Aaron Rodgers, and I totally agree with you in the aspect of, things definitely could have been worse if Rodgers wasn't in there. Not a great game from Aaron when he did have some of those opportunities to throw the ball down the field. Didn't hit, obviously, the opportunity to Toure, a couple turnovers in the red zone, one maybe a little bit fluky going off the linebacker's helmet, popping up in the air. Sometimes that's, like Matt LaFleur says, the cost of doing business. But I would say probably one of the tougher games from him where I know you've, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know you've kind of been of the idea of like, hey, this is Aaron Rodgers, and we'll live and die with Aaron. And if things aren't working with Aaron at quarterback, it probably is not going to work overall. But what did you see from this game out of Aaron, and have your thoughts changed at all of where he's at quarterback right now?
My thoughts haven't changed. I still think he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league who just is having a spell of bad games. He's in a situation that he probably hasn't been in a long time. If this is going towards the Jordan Love question, my answer is you play your best players until unless they can't play. Jordan Love is not going to be, it's like you have to start thinking about. Well, let's first. Sorry, Andy. Let's talk. Aaron Rodgers had a bad game. He had one of the worst games I've ever seen him play. He made some bad decisions. He made there's some throws to be made that he hasn't made that he's made in the past. There's some times that he's seen the rush that, and after his maybe second or third year in the league, you didn't see him making, seeing the rush and making those errors like he's made it. He still is able to make any throw on the field. He's still able to do things with his legs. He looks like he moves just as well as he used to, but he seems frustrated. He's like the body language. He certainly seems as frustrated as I've ever seen him.
For sure.
And we don't. And I just have to I have to say this just so contextually people understand out there that have never been in an NFL locker room. I've been on other teams in the Green Bay Packers. Carolina Panthers are a great example where the grumblings of the quarterback, because what you don't see from the receivers running the wrong routes, from the offensive line blocking the wrong people, from all these things come on the back of the quarterback. And Aaron, you earn that because you make $50 million a year. You're a 4-time MVP. You've earned everything. All the attention is going to be on you. That burden, he thinks he can, it's always like, I got big shoulders, I can take the burden. Right now, he's feeling what that burden actually feels like when people around you don't perform. And sometimes, even as great as you are, when people around you don't perform, you have bad days. And sometimes those bad days, unfortunately, come in succession. And that's kind of what is happening with Aaron Rodgers right now. But moving forward, this guy is the best opportunity to win football games. And what kind of message are you sending? Are the Green Bay Packers the kind of team that are sending the message I guess we're just going to reboot and we'll start over fresh next year? We want to see if you don't know what you have in Jordan Love through practice right now, then you really don't. You have no idea what you're doing anyways. The people that say that Jordan Love he needs to go out there and get some games in and we need to see what he has because maybe he's trade bait. Yeah, maybe he is. But I would, from what we've seen, what we saw the Kansas City Chiefs, what they see in practice every day, if they don't have a good idea and they're going to go put him out there, the hesitation would be, what if he doesn't perform? Right? And now we're going to get nothing for him. We're stuck with and then the onus is on us as Gutekunst and all these guys who made this personnel decision to draft him in the first round when you had an Aaron Rodgers. And you could have picked up a receiver or anybody else that's viable that would have played in the last couple of years, and you decided not to do that, you look like a fool. So you have to be very, very smart about what is moving forward. Aaron Rodgers is the leader of this football team. I don't think you sit the leader of the football team to see if you have something with a third-year quarterback who's, to be fair, has had plenty of opportunities to show what he's got.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I think Green Bay told us all we needed to know about Jordan Love to some extent when they've continued to re-up Aaron Rodgers and go all in. There's no way to me, if they thought they had the next, even really, even good starting quarterback, 15th best quarterback in the NFL, something like that they probably don't take that trade package from Denver for Aaron Rodgers, because now you've got the young, talented quarterback who's really good, top 15, top 16 quarterback, and you've got a plethora of draft picks, a ton of salary cap space. That is the dream. That's the best way to build a football team, is if you have a young, talented quarterback and can put everything around him.
And there's precedent here in Green Bay with Brett.
Exactly.
There's precedent. So again, when people come out and say, maybe we should play him, and they know, I promise you, Brian Gutekunst is he knows, he watches film every day. He watches practice. He's seen the Chiefs game. He's seen he knows what he has. There's not something Jordan Love isn't magically going to turn into, the next coming of Matt Ryan or Phillip Rivers or something like that overnight. It's not going to happen. Maybe he develops into a great quarterback, but it's very, very difficult right now, given his body of work, given what they've seen, given the actions that they've taken, like you just discussed, to think that taking the reins away from a 4-time MVP to the leader of this team, to the guy that's making $50 million a year, to sit him for any other reason than injury doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think it does become extremely even if they wanted to go in that direction, I do think it becomes extremely complicated to do something like that because this could be Rodgers' last season. Is that how you want him to go out? Is by putting Jordan Love on the field instead? Again, what message does that send to the rest of the team when you've got guys that aren't running the right routes, can't do a lot of the basics that we've been talking about? Yet it's Rodgers that gets benched. Like there's just a lot of connotation that goes into it, and I think it could make things worse more than it could actually make things better.
And if he retired, if he came out and if he walked up there today and said, "Hey, listen, I'm out of here. I'm done with this." I would change my opinion.
Meaning that if he said he was going to retire in the offseason?
No, meaning if he walked up there today and said, "You know what, this is my last go. I'm not playing with you guys next year. I don't believe in this. Gotcha. I don't believe in what you're trying to build." Then I would say, "All right, you can just retire right now as far as I'm concerned." You know what I mean? Like you can sit here and be the backup, but if the season is mathematically over, then you got to start preparing because like it or not, Jordan Love's going to be your guy and you have to start. It's just like with the Justin Fields thing. It takes a couple of weeks, might take a couple of months, might take a couple of years to figure out what kind of system you can actually run with the guy because you've already invested draft capital in him. And let's be honest, you might not be in a position to draft a guy that's ready to start day one next year. And from a free agent standpoint, with the cap space or the cap hit you're going to get with Aaron Rodgers, all of these things become infinitely more difficult. So that would be maybe the caveat to my earlier statement.
No, and I totally get it. And either way, it's a difficult conversation because there's just so much that goes into it and the optics of everything, how you handle those. I agree with you. It's just it's a complicated issue and there's no easy answer to it. I want to talk to you. We talked about him a little bit so far and on that second play of the game. I don't know what to do with Sammy Watkins at this point. And going back to your earlier point of the wide receivers in this game, I don't know about you. I don't know how many times I saw a wide receiver on the ground or just inability to get off of press coverage in this game. Mm-hmm. It was jarring. How physical the Lions were with the Packers receivers, but Toure, Watkins, it happened to Lazard on a couple different occasions.
Being rerouted, is that what you mean?
Being rerouted or just almost being just stuck. Just being stuck. And there are multiple times where they basically hitting them and the Packers receivers going to the ground.
You're getting bullied.
Yeah. But with Watkins, you saw that inability to get off of press. You saw incorrect routes. You saw a dropped pass behind the line of scrimmage. He's banged up. He's hurt. I get it. But man, that was a really rough game for Sammy and really the wide receiver core as a whole.
Yeah. And, we talked about it last week. You start looking at things that work against the Detroit Lions. You think about switch releases, you think about motion to, when you just stand there and get in front of a guy and you're not good at press release and these guys come and play you up because they don't respect you and you're getting jammed within your 5 yards and it's throwing you off your entire route, or you're getting pushed outside the numbers when you're supposed to stick inside. I mean, just little things like that, details that you might not see if you're just trying to watch the game and you're following the football. But this stuff matters. And from a timing perspective, it goes back to it. When Aaron Rodgers is dropped back, hitting his fifth step and literally nobody's open or people have been rerouted, or they're on the ground, to your point, it begs the question, and I always go back to if you're not preparing to be successful, you're just preparing to fail.
Yeah.
So I don't understand what is happening from this Sunday's game, so Monday through until the next game. I don't understand what's happening in that room that you're not seeing consistent improvement. Right? Your wide receiver room this year, and I understand the injuries, but injuries notwithstanding, the individual play should look something like a stock market chart during a bull market where there's going to be some up and down days, but the trend line should be up. Yeah. And I don't know if the trend line's up. I mean, you see, maybe individually with some guys, but the trend line has not been pointing up this entire season. It's been way too inconsistent.
I know the reports have been, and I can't speak to it. I don't know for sure. We're not in the locker room, obviously. I know the reports are that Aaron doesn't want a lot of motion, doesn't want, to be under center. He wants to be in shotgun, wants things a little bit more static on the outside, and wants to be able to make the checks and read defenses and do the things that he does really well. If that's the case, and again, I don't know 100% that it is, but if that's the case, to me, I as a coach have to go to Aaron with this tape and say, this is why we can't play static. This is why we can't just line up and play 3 wide receivers and they're all out wide. You're not going to go in motion. And we're going to go every defense since the Buccaneers in the second half, when they went press man against the Packers. Packers couldn't do anything against the second half against the Bucs. Every defense has basically done the exact same thing against the Packers. You just played the worst defensive backfield in the NFL in the Detroit Lions. It's not going to get any easier than that the remainder of the season. And if you couldn't beat that defensive backfield with doing that, to me, you have to make a change and be like, this cannot work. It's only going to get worse from here.
Yeah, and it's going to get worse on Sunday.
Yes, very much
because
so.
they're like 50%, cover one press man coverage.
Yeah,
so
what they do best.
Yeah, welcome to Thunderdome, because it's about to go down. And if you don't, but Andy, it's not. It is that, but it's also if you're going to do that and you go under center and you run some play action and you give these guys time so they can run Sarah's. I mean, the other thing that's kind of there's two things. One, if you stack receivers, if you run bunches, then you know that some of these guys are going to get free releases. That's just how it's literally by design. And if you get off of your route tree, like sometimes when the Packers run routes right now, it literally looks like they're running it off the high school route tree. Remember, like, the one's the out, the two's the slant, it looks like a route tree. This is the National Football League. Like, we do not run routes that are longer. Some of these routes take long, like your crossing routes, but your sail routes, like, that go into different zones and come back out. Force people to switch and switch back. Force linebackers to turn their head. Force people to be aware of who's coming in and out. Like, we don't do a lot of that. No. It's very simple for us to, like, or it's very simple for the defender to cover a route that has maybe one move or is just going straight or just has a slight bend. Like, if we're not crossing over zones and doing double moves, like, this stuff is really, really, it's a hard life, man. Like, this playing wide receiver in the National Football League is hard. You're playing against the best athletes on the field at the defensive back position. And if you're just coming with the easy release or a static release and route trees, it's too hard. It's too hard a sport.
I totally agree. Let's jump over to the defensive side of the ball. I thought you had a great video. You posted a play where, I think Kenny Clark gets turned around on the play and, his back's facing the team. Interesting couple of weeks from Kenny. Hasn't played quite as well that he did earlier in the season. He's still obviously a phenomenal football player, but not the point. The point being is that I think this offense clearly not setting this defense up for success. This defense has been on the field a ton. And more importantly, they've been on the field a ton when the game has either been tied, or the other team's been winning, which opens up the entire playbook and everything at the opposing offense's disposal, which just makes things really, really difficult. And you can see that these defenders are getting tired and they're getting worn out through the course of the game and things are getting easier. I thought no more evidence than that, 13 play, 70-yard touchdown drive against the Packers when they finally get a touchdown on offense, make it 8-6, miss the 2-point conversion. And then again, immediately Lions go right down the field, slam it right down the Packers defense and make it a 2-possession game.
Yeah. The Lions offensive line is the strength of their offense. And you saw why. They do a lot of things really well. They did a great job against the rush for the most part during the game. They did a great job in the running game. I think the Lions averaged 3 yards a carry, but they came in with it. Let's just put it this way. Like, sometimes you come into a game trying to drop 36. Sometimes you come into a game with a very specific plan. And the plan is to run the ball, hold the clock, make this as short a game as possible. Like, Dan Campbell is going into that game with his game plan. Like, hey, we're going to try to make this game as short as possible. We want to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field. We don't know when he's going to get hot. And then they had a defensive plan for, obviously, with the receivers and what they're going to do. And they executed their game plan. I mean, could they have done a better job in some area? Absolutely. Like every team like this, there's still players in the National Football League. But it's a trend that we're seeing now where these games are close. The defense is not benefiting from being up 14 points and they get to pin their ears back and they get to have those good days. And what you see, and it's not necessarily even like we harp on how bad the run defense is this year, and it's not great, but it's a completely different conversation. Sorry, Andy, it's a completely different conversation if you're up 14, if the game is not always close. Like if you can run, if your entire playbook's open, this is a whole different ball game. The whole point of the game really is like by the time you get to the third quarter, you make the other team one dimensional. And if you can't do that, like it's going to be hard to stop people in the National Football League.
And credit to the Packers defense for in some of these games keeping it as close as possible in some of those situations, because they allow a touchdown before halftime, but man, like the offense doesn't do anything in the first half, at least point production wise. And they allow 8 points. I talked about it this week, but so that they allow, what was it? 15 points in this game. Was it 15-9?
15-9. Yep.
15-9. So 15 points in this game. If you don't have the weirdo, Jair Alexander running into the kicker penalty, it's 13-9. That's not on the defense. That to me is on the weird special teams area. That's 13-9. And then you set the offense up for what should have been 3 points with the Jair Alexander interception that put them at the 23-yard line of the Lions that ends up in the Rodgers interception. But they basically gave what should have been gifted the Packers 3 points if they just line up and kick the field goal right after the interception. To me, this is a net 10-point game for the Packers defense that they net allowed in this game. Like that should win you almost every single week, but the offense just not. And then that's even with having the entire Lions playbook at their disposal against them through the entirety of this game. And it's just frustrating because I think as frustrating as his defense has been from time to time, that they're probably the least of the Packers' issues at the moment, at least until Rashawn Gary went out with an ACL injury.
Yeah, I think it'll be different with him gone, unfortunately, but I couldn't agree with you more. As much I think the problem is expectations with the defense.
Yeah,
the expectations were very, very high, and they're probably somewhere around 16th right now. But unfortunately, if if the expectation is you're going to be 16th or you're middle of the road, and we thought you were going to be 5th, then you're always going to be a disappointment. And again, contextually, there's reasons that these things are happening, but at the end of it, you still have to be able to get blocks. You still have to make tackles in the alley. We had. What, 2 touchdowns on miscommunications?
Yeah, I think so.
And honestly, the first drive, the 4th down that goes incomplete in the end zone, another miscommunication. Jair Alexander's on the wrong guy.
Yep, should have been a touchdown if Goff hits it. Yep.
Yeah, he hits it late. So you got potentially 3 touchdowns right there. That one was a bad pass, but 2 could have been wiped out just by communicating the right way, and they don't.
And we've talked about this before, but the most frustrating, disappointing aspect of this is miscommunications were an issue in the very first game of the season. This was an issue against the Vikings that cost them on numerous occasions. And we're now sitting in week 9 and it is still an issue. And those are the things that got to get improved.
Yeah. If you look at the one in particular, when they went motion, Darnell Savage, I think it was Rudy Ford, calls him off and goes and tries to undercut the tight end, which that would have been a touchdown anyway. He took the wrong angle. But then they did the bootleg and they threw it to the tight end on the backside.
Yep.
When they switch off. Like the thing that is, as a football player, the thing is perplexing, and I'm not a defensive guy, but like you just know how things operate. They have like their goal line defense. They know like there's a specific coverage, and you either, and it's a light switch. You either switch this or you don't. There's not like, well, maybe we're going to switch it this time. And everybody on that field should know exactly what's supposed to happen. So the fact that was even a question is bizarre. That it's even a question that Savage switches it off and they both follow the play side tight end is absolutely bizarre just from like a coaching standpoint. Like is it possible that we're not on the same page on such a simplistic thing? That's bizarre to me.
Yeah. So the play Mike's talking about obviously is the wide open touchdown to Zylstra. And memory serves, the one tight end comes in motion. Everyone's in man-to-man coverage. Savage was clearly on the tight end that was wide open. And then Amos and the other tight end comes in motion. Amos goes along with him. The tight end goes out in the flat. Savage is trying to communicate with Amos to be like, you go. And then he was going to cover the flat. Like you said, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because the angle was poor. The flat was open, probably if they wanted the touchdown in the flat. But Amos keeps coming as if he's in man-to-man coverage with his guy the entire time, not making any adjustment. Meanwhile, Savage makes the initial move to go with the tight end in the flat and then sort of like does like a just little spin to like in no man's land because there was the miscommunication. And then you've got Savage's guy originally that just goes Zylstra wide open in the opposite corner of the end zone. These are 2 safeties that have played together this is the 4th year, right? This is their 4th year playing together now. that just can't happen. It's unfathomable that those things can happen at this point in the season. And like you said, there's probably a base call that they have that they're going to do every single time if that happens, and they just can't get it communicated.
And that again, the frustrating part about all of it when you watch games and you study them like you and I have, is a lot of this is mental. They're not necessarily sometimes you get physically beat. You talked about Kenny Clark getting turned around on a double team. Sometimes you get physically beat. And honestly, as a player, you can live with that.
Yeah.
What you can't live with is all of the mental errors and miscommunications that are going along with this game, because that speaks to preparation. And then when we start talking about preparation, you don't get too far down the road, but you start talking about, okay, what does preparation consist of? Well, there's the individual, and then there's the team. Who's in charge of the team? The coaching staff, right? Are we doing a good job preparing these guys to be successful?
And when you have that stuff littered through the tape 9 weeks through the season on offense, defense, and special teams, I don't know what that is other than a major red flag. Let's talk about a positive. Rudy Ford, Isaiah McDuffie, probably not guys that are ever going to go to a Pro Bowl. I think that's probably fair to say, at least as defenders. Maybe Rudy Ford can get there as a special teamer at some point, but both of them, really nice game. Rudy Ford is every single time he's been on the field defensively has made positive plays and positive contributions to the defense. And Isaiah McDuffie this week, I thought he was fantastic as a run defender, slipping blocks, getting, making tackles. Like, he was all over the place. I thought this was an impressive game from both of those players.
Yeah, we highlighted both those guys on our show on Monday. Isaiah McDuffie in particular, I've been a big fan of him since the preseason. He's just continued to show up. And Andy, he's kind of what we've talked about all year, what we're missing from the linebacker position. Guys that are slipping blocks and hitting the running back in the hole. And there's actually two specific plays. One where he slips the right guard, hits the guy in the hole, and the other when he comes across the ball, across the center, and gets the guy on a pulling play. He gets the guy right in the hole in the B gap. And he's meeting the player at the line of scrimmage. That's like old school. This is how we play linebacker. And the difference, the contrast and again, Quay Walker's a great athlete, and there's a lot of positives, and this is not a knock on him at all. It's just the style of play is different. And I happen to be more familiar and therefore more ingratiated to the style of play where we don't tackle the guy 8 yards downfield after we get off the block. We chase him. I just personally like the style of play where we shed the block and hit the guy in the hole. That's just how I like to see football. So Agreed. I'm a huge fan of McDuffie, no question about it. Ford's a great tackler as well. And, given the injury, given the Stokes injury, given the situation at safety, it just begs to at least ask the question, like, when do his reps go up? Not if, but I guess when do his reps start going up?
No, I totally agree. Like, there's probably some coverage issues with Ford, maybe that they don't feel comfortable with, whatever. But like,
compared to what?
Very, very, very fair point. Very fair point. But man, like, this team just needs a couple guys that play with a little bit more juice and intensity and sprint to the ball and hit guys. And man, Rudy Ford has been that every single time he's on the field. And yes, point very, very well taken. All right, before we get out of here, last question for you. Jeff Saturday named head coach. I want to get your thoughts on that. And more importantly, if everything ever does go south with Matt LaFleur and Mark Murphy says, Mike, we got to have you as head coach. What does the Mike Wahle era look like with you as head coach of the Green Bay Packers?
Let's start with Jeff Saturday. I think Jeff Saturday is an incredibly capable person to be a head coach in the National Football League, and I think that's going to. I've heard a lot of people this week saying that he's not qualified, saying that he doesn't have the experience, and I think from some of the machinations that come along with being head coach, as far as what you have to deal with during the week, obviously things like game management. He's going to have people in the booth that are going to help him with that. He's not a play caller, and so there's all these different kinds of head coaches. There's head coaches that call plays. There's head coaches that are specific to defense, and then there's kind of people managers. And Jeff Saturday would be a people manager, and I happen to think that he'll be a very good one. The problem that I have with it is that when the owners are talking about experience, in particular with some of these, some of the African-American coaches that are more than qualified to be on the. By the way, I think Reggie Wayne's on the staff, and it's like you find out Reggie Wayne's on the staff, and you go, well, "Why the hell isn't Reggie Wayne the coach if this is the criteria?"
Seriously,
just make Reggie Wayne. That was very easy, right? And so it does fly in the face of the Rooney Rule, even though it's not technically the Rooney Rule because it's an interim basis, but it does just again demonstrate that, Jim Irsay and billionaires are going to do what billionaires want to do, and they're not going to listen to anybody, and they're not going to answer anybody. I don't think that, that's not anything on Jeff. I can tell you that, I had a successful career. I played 11 years in the league. I had a executive who's come out in support of this, because I'm sure he wants a job from Irsay, tell me like, all of your experience is lucky enough to get you a foot in the door, and that's it. Right. And you hear Keyshawn Johnson says the reason that I don't want to coach is because like I don't think that my 12 years Super Bowl, all pro, first pick in the draft experience is on the same level as a guy who knows a lot about Vizio that's 23 years old, and I should be in the same spot as him. And so you have, and whether or not you agree with that or not, it's right. Just I understand the way that people think, but I'm shocked that they hired him. From a practical standpoint, because they had qualified people on staff. And I'm not talking about Gus Bradley and John Fox, although I think Gus is a great coach. I'm talking about guys like, if you want somebody to change the culture, you put in a Reggie Wayne, or you call Tarek Glenn's in town. I mean, there's guys there that kind of give you the same. I'll tell you what's interesting about this, Andy. To be honest with you, it's like John Lynch. It's like. Do you remember when Matt Millen ran the Alliance?
Oh yeah. Very well.
Right. Of course, everybody does. We love it. Right. It's like the glory days for the Packers. Like Matt Millen, go take charge of the Lions, like ruin them for 12 years. Right. And coming off TV, and it's amazing the power that the television has, because these guys literally these owners are going, oh, he sounds smart on a scripted thing on television. Not that Jeff Saturday's not smart, but this is right. How they think. It's like, oh, he must have all the answers. And it is absolutely, it's amazing. It really is amazing that in this day and age, that actually happened. I hope it works out. I'm a big fan of Jeff Saturday, but I'm amazed that it happened.
Whether it's, president of the country or head coach of an NFL football team, getting a lot of time on air can get you a lot of different things in this world, unfortunately. And we live in a time, and I'm not saying this is Jeff Saturday, we live in a time, unfortunately, where sometimes the loudest get the most popularity and get the most support. And like I said, I don't think that's necessarily Jeff Saturday in this situation, but it's just unfortunate that sometimes the most qualified and people that are a little bit more deserving don't get those opportunities a bit more often. So
let me ask you this, Andy, before we go. In your opinion, what qualifies somebody to be a good head coach? Because we've seen that like a position coach doesn't necessarily make a good coordinator, or coordinator doesn't necessarily make a good head coach. What are the qualities if you're building a team? What kind of, first of all, of those three coaches that we talked about, which one are you looking for? And like, so what are the qualities that are important to you? Because, I think we can all agree that there's some really good and some really bad head coaches.
Yeah. So, and like you said, I don't think there's any necessarily perfect formula, but things that I really want to see, and this is a word that I know you're going to love, I want to see really process-oriented coaches. Like, how do you get results out of process? I want to know a coach that has a plan offensively, defensively, and special teams for how this team is going to look both now and moving forward, have a vision for what that looks like. I want it to focus on, obviously, like, this is going to sound insane, maybe not. I always thought Mike McCarthy did a tremendous job with keeping his pulse on the team. Now, maybe not so much in the later years, but certainly when he was really, really good, keeping his pulse on the team, having to process how he evaluated players, and like just keeping everything. How do I want to say it? Like there was never anything that got like overlooked. Like he just had the temperature of everything. Everything was evaluated. Everything always had a process to it. Not perfect by any means, but that's something that I want. I want somebody who has some ingenuity and creativity. I don't think you can stay stale in today's NFL. I think you have to be constantly evolving. And I like, one of the things that would probably be an ultimate turnoff for me would be the coaches that say, this is my scheme and I have to get the only players that can fit this scheme. If I can't get an amazingly talented player, and my GM would draft that player, and I'm like, nope, I can't use that guy because he doesn't fit my scheme, then your scheme does. Like, it has to be malleable enough that you as the coach can mold your scheme to be successful to what the players that you have on your team. So the ability to have process, the ability to hold accountability, ways to make players better over time, a progression, creativity, and then again, malleability with what you want, what you want to do as a coach and how you can fit players to your scheme. Those are just off the top of my head some of the things that would be super important to me.
Yeah. So to put a bow on that, like Mike McDaniel seems like a really good coach, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Right. And he doesn't have a lick of playing experience.
Exactly.
Like out in the pro leagues. But like I feel the exact same way. I listen to him. I see how he's going about his business. I see how he's like so passionate about developing players. And I just go, man, I think this guy's gonna have a bright career. Like
I do too.
I'm super excited for him.
No, you love seeing those type of coaches, and you can just see he's super creative too. And I just love when you've got not what I would maybe agent of chaos is a little bit strong, but an agent of change, right? Like he has the ability to be a coach that like other teams eventually look at and be like, look what Mike McDaniel's doing. And I think that can hopefully be an agent of change for the NFL for how they view him and how successful he can potentially be. Mike, phenomenal stuff as always. These are just a joy every single week. Tell the people where we can follow you on Twitter and about your podcast as well.
Yeah, Mike Wahle 68 on Twitter. Check out On My Block. It's a Packers podcast I do with Packers all-time leading rusher Amon Green. You can check that out anywhere you get your podcast. We do a ton of video breakdown. So that's on the Process to Perform channel at YouTube. So go to YouTube/Process to Perform. You can check that out or just Google On My Block.
Yeah, it's phenomenal stuff. Enjoy you and Amon every single week. Of course, you can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. We will be back here next week. Actually, what day after? Or no, we'll have to actually talk about that because it's Titans Thursday night game. So we'll have to figure out something in that regard. But
Jeffrey Simmons is going to be a problem.
It's going to be a major problem. But either way, Mike and I will be back at some point. I'll be right back here tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.